She was treated like a servant, humiliated every day by the family who destroyed her mother. But then the millionaire heir arrived and fell in love with the servant. The family never accepted this possible romance. Watch this story until the end. You'll be surprised by this story. If you like love stories, romance, subscribe to this channel. Every day we post videos like this, continuing. The rain beat against the windows of the Blackwood mansion with the persistence of someone who knows all the secrets of the house. Emily pressed her forehead against the cold glass of the library, watching the drops trickle down like tears she would never allow herself to shed. 28 years living within these walls, and she still felt like an intruder, a shadow that the family tolerated but never embraced. The sound of Victoria Blackwood's heels echoed through the marble corridor, each step a sentence of authority. That made Emily automatically straighten her shoulders. At 72, the matriarch still commanded this Beacon Hill mansion like a queen in her palace, deciding who deserved her favor and who should remain in the shadows. "Emily, come here immediately." The voice cut through the silence like a sharp blade. She moved away from the window, smoothing the grey dress that Victoria had chosen for her 3 years ago. Simple, discreet, almost invisible. Exactly as she should be. Her steps were measured, silent, learned through decades of trying not to disturb, not to be noticed more than necessary. Victoria stood in the center of the main living room, her gloved hands holding an official letter. Her silver hair was impeccably styled, as always, and her grey eyes had that calculating coldness that Emily knew all too well. "Nathan returns from London next week," said Victoria, without any preamble. "I want you to prepare his room. Change. All the bedding, clean every inch of that space. He's bringing important investors to dinner, and this house needs to be impeccable." Emily nodded, as she always did. "Yes, Mrs. Blackwood." "And Emily," the woman's voice grew even colder, "I want you to understand something very clearly. Nathan is no longer the spoiled boy who left for Europe 5 years ago. He's returned to take over the family business, to marry someone suitable to our status. Isabella Montgomery will be introduced to him soon, and I will not tolerate any kind of distraction." Victoria's gaze pierced Emily like a poisoned arrow. Nothing more needed to be said. The message was clear. Stay invisible, stay away, stay in your place. "I understand perfectly, Mrs. Blackwood." "Excellent, now go. I have important calls to make." Emily left the room with her heart pounding in her chest. Nathan Blackwood. The boar. Name echoed in her mind like a distant echo of summers past, when he was just the rebellious grandson who escaped his studies to read adventure stories in the library. She remembered him as a young man with intense green eyes and an easy smile, always kind to her when no one was looking. But that was a long time ago, before he discovered who she really was. Before he understood that she was nothing more than a charity case, a family charity. Before he left for London without even saying goodbye. She climbed the stairs toward the 3rd floor, where Nathan's room was located. Her hands trembled slightly as she turned the golden doorknob. The room was exactly as he had left it 5 years ago, preserved like a sanctuary by the housekeeper, whom Victoria had fired shortly after his departure. It was a masculine, elegant room with dark mahogany furniture and a privileged view of the gardens. Economics and philosophy books shared space on the shelves with equestrian trophies and photographs of travels through Europe. Emily ran her fingers over the leather cover of a Hemingway novel that she herself had recommended to him years ago. She began to work methodically, changing sheets, cleaning surfaces, reorganizing objects. It was work she knew well, but it always brought her a strange melancholy when it came to this particular room. How many times had she imagined what it would be like if she truly belonged to that world? If she could sit in the leather armchair, by the fireplace and discuss books as an equal, not as a tolerated intruder. It was while cleaning the desk that her fingers found something unexpected, a secret drawer, almost imperceptible in the worked wood. Her heart raced. She shouldn't mess with it, she knew that, but a force greater than her prudence pushed her forward. Inside the drawer was only one object, a small notebook with a worn leather cover. It wasn't Nathan's. The delicate handwriting on the first page made her world stop. Mary Sanders Wilson. Her mother. Emily's hands trembled violently as she leafed through the yellowed pages. They were fragments of a diary, letters, never sent intimate thoughts that her mother had recorded during her last years of life. And on several pages, surrounded by nervous scribbles, one name was repeated, V. Blackwood. He promised he would take care of Emily when I was no longer here. Said she would have a future, that she would never need to know the truth about what really happened that night. But I'm afraid V knows too much, and Victoria will never forgive what she discovered about us. Emily read and reread those lines until the words were etched into her soul like a hot brand. What truth? What night? And who was this V. Blackwood that her mother mentioned with such intimacy and terror? She closed the notebook carefully, her heart beating so hard she feared someone might hear. She needed to know more, needed to understand what those words meant. But first, she needed to hide this dangerous treasure. She ran to her small room in the attic, a simple space with just a bed, an old wardrobe, and a desk where she wrote her stories in the few free hours she had. She hid the notebook inside a crack in the wall, behind a loose board that she had discovered years ago. During the following days, Emily couldn't think of anything else. She mentally reread every word of her mother's diary, trying to decipher the enigmas she had left behind. Who was Mary Sanders Wilson, really? Why had she died so young, from a disease that no one could properly explain? And what was her true relationship with the Blackwood family? The answers seemed to dance on the tip of her tongue, like a familiar melody that she couldn't quite fully remember. It was on a rainy Thursday that the sound of an imported car cut through the afternoon silence. Emily was in the kitchen helping Mrs. Carter, the cook, prepare a special lunch when they heard the noise of gates closing. "That must be Mr. Nathan," murmured Mrs. Carter, a 60-year-old woman who had worked in the house longer than Emily herself. Victoria ordered his room prepared just yesterday. Emily's heart raced. She wasn't prepared to see him again, not yet. Not with so many questions burning in her mind, not with her mother's notebook hidden as proof that there was much more between the Wilson and Blackwood families than anyone imagined. They heard voices in the entrance hall, Victoria's polite but cold welcoming him, and then a male voice that made Emily grab onto the kitchen sink to keep from fainting. Deep, confident, with a slightly English accent that wasn't there before. Nathan had returned, and he was no longer the young man she remembered. "Mrs. Carter, go fetch Emily," ordered Victoria, appearing at the kitchen door like a ghostly apparition. "I want her to take Nathan's luggage to his room." Emily dried her, hands on her apron, trying to control the tremor that ran through her entire body. She smoothed her brown hair that she always kept in a simple bun and took a deep breath before walking toward the main hall. He had his back to her, talking with Victoria about investments and business expansion. He wore an impeccably cut dark suit that accentuated his imposing height. His black hair was shorter, combed back in a way that made him seem more mature, more dangerous somehow. When he turned to greet her, Emily felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Nathan's green eyes studied her with an intensity that she didn't remember from before. There was something different in them, a hardness that didn't exist in the gentle young man of her memory. He examined her from head to toe with a deliberate slowness that made her skin burn. "Emily," he said, and even the way he pronounced her name was different, more controlled, more calculating. "You've changed." She lowered her eyes automatically, the defensive gesture learned through years of training not to be noticed. "Mr. Nathan, welcome back." "Mr. Nathan?" He laughed, but there was no warmth in that sound. "What formality is this, Emily? We grew up together, didn't we?" Victoria intervened before she could respond. "Emily, take Nathan's luggage to his room. And then I want you to organize the library for tomorrow's meeting." "Of course, Mrs. Blackwood." Emily headed for the expensive leather suitcases that were stacked near the entrance, but Nathan stopped her with a gesture. "Leave that. I'll take them myself." His eyes met hers again, and Emily felt as if he were reading each of her secret thoughts. "But you can accompany me. I'd like to talk about the old days." Victoria frowned, but she couldn't refuse a direct request from Nathan. "Very well, but don't take long. Emily has important tasks to complete." They climbed the stairs in silence, the weight of tension growing with each step. Emily walked a few steps behind him, observing how his broad shoulders filled the expensive suit, how he moved with a confidence that she didn't remember from before. When they reached the room, Nathan closed the door behind them with a soft click that made Emily shudder. "So," he said, throwing the suitcases onto the bed that she had arranged so carefully days before. "Tell me about all these years, Emily. What have you been doing besides hiding in the shadows, of course?" The casual cruelty of the observation hit her like a slap. "I've been taking care of the house, helping your grandmother." "Taking care of the house," he repeated, savoring the words as if they were a bad wine. "And your dreams. I remember you used to write stories about distant places, free people." He approached her, and Emily could smell the expensive cologne he wore. "Do you still write, Emily?" She swallowed hard, fighting against the urge to retreat. "Sometimes." "Sometimes." Nathan laughed again, that humorless sound that made her feel small. "What a waste. You had so much talent, so much passion." The word passion left his lips like a caress and a threat at the same time. Emily raised her eyes to face him, and for a moment she saw something familiar shining in those green irises, a memory of the young man who had been kind to her, who had read her stories and called them brilliant. But the impression quickly dissolved when he took another step in her direction, reducing the space between them to almost nothing. "You've grown up, Emily," he murmured, his eyes traveling across her face with an intimacy that made her heart dangerously accelerate, become interesting. His hand rose as if to touch her face, but stopped in the air a few inches from her skin. Emily felt the heat radiating from those fingers and had to fight against the insane impulse to lean toward that touch that didn't come. "I should go," she whispered, her voice barely managing to come out. "You should indeed," he agreed, but didn't move away. "Victoria wouldn't like seeing me talking with you for so long." There was something dangerous in the way he said, talking, as if he knew exactly the effect he was having on her, as if it were a game for him, a cruel diversion to pass the time. Emily took a step back, then another, until her back touched the door. Nathan followed her, placing a hand against the wood beside her head. He was so close now that she could see the small lines around his eyes, signs of the 5 years he had spent away from there. "Are you afraid of me, Emily?" The question came out as an intimate whisper, and she felt her entire body respond in a way that embarrassed her. It wasn't exactly fear that she was feeling, it was something much more dangerous, much more complicated. "No," she lied. "Nathan." Smiled then, the first genuine smile since he had arrived. "Liar," he said, but there was something almost affectionate in the accusation. "You were always a terrible liar." His fingers finally touched her face, just a light brush against her cheek that made Emily involuntarily close her eyes. It was a gentle touch, almost reverent, so different from the coldness he had demonstrated since arriving. "What happened to us, Emily?" he asked, and for the first time his voice sounded vulnerable. "We were friends. You trusted me." She opened her eyes and found him watching her with an intensity that almost made her melt. For a moment, he was again the young man she had known, the one who read to her on summer afternoons and made her laugh with funny stories about his private tutors. "You left," she said simply, without saying goodbye, without a word. Something darkened his face. "I was young, stupid. I thought it would be better that way." "Better for whom?" He didn't answer immediately. His fingers traced a delicate line along her jaw, and Emily felt a shiver run down her entire spine. "For all of us," he finally said. "Victoria made it very clear that my friendship with you wasn't appropriate, that I needed to learn my place in the world and you needed to learn yours." The pain of those words was like a stab. Emily pushed his hand away from her face, the magic of the moment dissolving like smoke. "And what is my place, Nathan?" she asked, her voice trembling with anger and hurt. "In the shadows? Invisible? Grateful for what I receive and silent about what I desire?" He took a step back, surprised by the intensity of her reaction. "Emily, No!" She cut him off, straightening her shoulders and finding a strength she didn't know she possessed. "You made your opinion about me very clear. About what I deserve. 5 years ago and today, too." She turned the doorknob, desperate to escape. That suffocating environment, that dangerous proximity that made her forget who she was and what he represented. "Emily, wait." But she had already left, closing the door forcefully behind her and running down the corridor as if pursued by demons. She only stopped when she reached her attic room, where she threw herself on the bed and finally let the tears fall. Nathan. Blackwood had returned, and with him all the dreams and nightmares that she had tried to bury for 5 long years. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay, looking at the ceiling, reliving every moment of the encounter with Nathan, every word, every look, every touch. Her skin still burned where he had touched, and she hated herself for it. She got up when the clock struck 2 in the morning and walked to her hiding place in the wall. She needed to reread her mother's notebook, needed to find some clue that would help her understand what was happening. But when she removed the loose board, the space was empty. The notebook had disappeared. Emily felt the blood freeze in her veins. She had hidden the diary there just a few days ago, and no one else knew about the existence of that hiding place. No one except... A soft knock on the door of her room made her jump in fright. Who would be awake at that hour of the early morning? She opened the door slowly and found Nathan standing in the corridor, still wearing the expensive suit, but with the tie undone and the first buttons of the shirt open. In his hands, the worn leather notebook that she had discovered in his room. "Looking for this?" he asked, raising the object between them. Emily felt as if the ground had opened beneath her feet. "How did you—" "I've known about your hiding place for years, Emily. I used to leave presents for you there when we were children. Remember the chocolates that magically appeared in your room on your birthdays?" She remembered. For years she had believed they were gifts from her mother, left by some secret friend who cared about her. She had never imagined they were from Nathan. "Did you read it?" she asked, her voice barely managing to come out. Nathan nodded slowly. "I read it. And now I understand why you were so different today. Why you looked at me as if you were seeing a ghost." He entered the room without waiting for permission, closing the door behind him. The small space seemed to shrink even more with his imposing presence. "Did you know?" asked Emily, finding courage to face him. "About my mother, about this V. Blackwood," she mentioned. Nathan went to the small window and stood looking out at the dark night. "Some things, yes. Others, I'm discovering now." "Then tell me, for God's sake, Nathan, tell me the truth. Who was my mother, really? Why did she die? And why does Victoria hate me so much?" He turned to face her, and Emily saw an internal struggle unfolding in those green eyes, as if he were debating with himself about how much he should reveal. "Your mother wasn't just a servant, Emily," he finally said. "She was special, intelligent, educated, beautiful. Very similar to you, actually." Emily felt her heart accelerate. "Continue. She arrived here when I was 12, you were 8. She said she needed work, that she had a small daughter to raise. My grandfather hired her immediately, against Victoria's will." Nathan paused, running a hand through his hair. "But it wasn't just because of her competence. There was something more. A connection that I didn't understand at the time." "What kind of connection?" "The kind that makes a matriarch like Victoria develop a deadly hatred for a simple servant," he said, moving closer to her again. "The kind that makes a married man forget his family duties." The revelation hit Emily like lightning. "Your grandfather and my mother had an affair?" "Yes, for almost 2 years, until Victoria discovered." Nathan was so close now that she could see the small golden flecks in his green eyes. "And when she discovered, she made sure your mother paid for it." Tears began to stream down Emily's face before she could even try to contain them. "Victoria killed her?" "Not directly, but she made Mary's life a living hell. She spread rumors about her in the city, made it difficult for her to get work anywhere. And when your mother got sick, Nathan hesitated, as if the next words were too painful to be said. Victoria refused to pay for adequate medical treatment, said she had made her bed and now must lie in it. Emily felt a rage so intense that it made her dizzy. "And you knew about this all these years?" "No, not completely." Nathan extended his hand to touch her face, but Emily moved away. "I was just a child when she died. I knew there was tension, that Victoria didn't like her, but I didn't understand the dimension of what had happened. I only discovered the truth when I started to become interested in you." "Interested in me?" "When you started to grow up, to become a woman, Victoria became paranoid that history would repeat itself, that I would fall in love with you like my grandfather fell in love with your mother." Nathan laughed bitterly. "Ironically, it was this paranoia of hers that really made me pay attention to you." Emily felt as if she were on an emotional roller coaster. Anger, sadness, confusion, and something dangerously close to hope mixed in her chest. "Is that why you left for London, to run away from me?" "To run away from what I was feeling for you, yes. Victoria made it very clear that if I stayed, if I continued our friendship, she would make you pay for your mother's sin. And after discovering what she was capable of doing to Mary..." Nathan shook his head. "I couldn't let that happen to you." "So you abandoned me to protect me?" asked Emily, her voice loaded with bitter sarcasm. "How noble of you." "I was young, Emily. Scared. I thought that if I left the scene, Victoria would lose interest in torturing you, that you could have a peaceful life here." "Peaceful?" Emily laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "You think these 5 years were peaceful for me? Being treated like a ghost as if my presence were an insult? Working as a servant in the house where my mother was humiliated to death?" Nathan closed his eyes, as if her words were physical blows. "I didn't know." "You didn't want to know," she corrected. "It was easier to run away and pretend I didn't exist." They remained in silence for long moments, the weight of truth hovering between them like a heavy cloud. Emily felt strangely liberated and desperate at the same time. She finally knew the truth about her mother, about why Victoria hated her so much. But this truth also brought the confirmation that she would never belong to that world, that she would always be seen as a threat, a living reminder of a scandal that the family wanted to forget. "And now?" she finally asked. "Now that you're back, what plans do you have, Nathan? Are you going to marry this Isabella that Victoria chose and pretend this conversation never happened?" Nathan opened his eyes and looked at her with an intensity that made her stomach turn. "I don't know," he said honestly. 5 years ago I ran because I was a coward, but now..." He took a step toward her, and Emily felt her entire body respond to that proximity. "Now I'm no longer a scared boy." "No," she agreed, retreating until her back touched the wall. "Now you're a man who has learned to play with people, who tests, provokes, invades spaces just to see what reaction he'll get." Nathan stopped, as if she had hit a sensitive point. "Is that what you think I'm doing, playing with you?" "Isn't it?" she challenged. "You arrived here today and immediately started to provoke me, to make me feel things I shouldn't feel, as if it were a game for you." "And if I said it's not a game?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "And if I said these 5 years in London were hell because I couldn't get you out of my head, that every woman I was with had your face, that I came back here knowing..." "Exactly what Victoria expected of me, but unable to resist the idea of seeing you again?" Emily felt as if the air had been sucked from her lungs. "Nathan, you want to know the truth?" he continued, placing his hands on the wall on each side of her head, trapping her between his arms. "The truth is that you haunted me for 5 years. The truth is that I tried to forget you, tried to be the man Victoria wanted me to be, but failed miserably." Emily could feel the heat radiating from his body, the masculine cologne that made her dizzy. His mouth was so close to hers that it would only take a slight tilt to... "The truth," he whispered, "is that I'm still in love with you. And that terrifies me, because I know Victoria will never allow us to be happy." Emily's heart was beating, so hard that she was sure he could hear it. For 5 years she had dreamed of hearing words like those, of discovering that it hadn't been just her who felt that impossible connection. But now that the moment was here, she felt paralyzed by fear. "You can't say things like that," she whispered. "You're going to marry Isabella." "Not if I can help it," he said, his lips almost touching hers. "Victoria will never accept it. Then we'll have to find a way to make her accept it." Emily closed her eyes, fighting against the desire to surrender, to that moment, to that dangerous proximity. "And if we can't? And if she destroys us like she destroyed my mother?" Nathan backed away slightly, enough for her to see his eyes. "Then at least we will have tried. At least we won't have spent the rest of our lives wondering what if." He raised his hand and touched her face with a gentleness that contrasted with the intensity of his proximity. "Emily, I know I don't have the right to ask this after everything. That's happened. I know I hurt you, that I abandoned you when you needed me most, but I'm asking for a chance, an opportunity to show that I can be the man you deserve." Emily felt tears streaming down her face again, but this time they weren't just from sadness. There was hope there too, a dangerous spark of possibility that she had buried 5 years ago. "Nathan, she began, but was interrupted by the sound of footsteps in the corridor. They moved apart instantly, Nathan hiding the notebook behind his back, while Emily quickly wiped away the tears. The door opened without anyone knocking, and Victoria appeared in the entrance, her cold eyes scanning the environment with suspicion. "Nathan," she said, her voice as cold as ice. "What are you doing here?" "I came to return this to Emily," he responded calmly, showing the notebook. "I found it among my belongings. It must have gotten mixed up during the move." Victoria examined the object with distrust. "What book is that?" "Just an old diary," said Emily quickly, extending her hand to receive the notebook. "Thank you, Mr. Nathan." The matriarch narrowed her eyes, clearly sensing that there was something more happening there. "Nathan, I hope you understand that certain friendships from the past should remain in the past. You have responsibilities now, important commitments to fulfill." "I understand perfectly, grandmother," said Nathan, but Emily noticed the tension in his jaw. "Good night, Emily." He left the room, followed by Victoria, who cast one last warning look at Emily before closing the door. Emily was left alone in the dark, holding the notebook against her chest and trying to process everything that had happened. Nathan was in love with her. He always had been. And now he had returned, determined to fight for them, even knowing the risks. But would it be enough? Would they be capable of facing Victoria Blackwood's power and coming out victorious? Or were they destined to repeat the tragedy of her mother and Nathan's grandfather? One thing was certain. The shadows in which she had lived for 28 years were finally beginning to dissipate, and for the first time in a long time, Emily Sanders Wilson felt alive. The days following the nocturnal confrontation passed like a delicate and dangerous dance. Emily and Nathan moved through the house like two magnets, constantly attracting and repelling each other, always aware of each other's presence, but forced to maintain appearances under Victoria's watchful eye. Emily woke every morning with her heart racing, knowing that at any moment she might encounter him in the corridors, and when this happened, the tension was almost palpable. A look that lasted a second longer than it should, a word whispered when they passed each other, the accidental brush of fingers when she served coffee in the dining room. Nathan had established a routine of morning meetings with investors and partners, transforming the library into his temporary office. Emily began to avoid that environment, but still found excuses to pass by the corridor, just to hear his deep voice discussing business with important men from Boston. It was on one of these mornings that Victoria made the announcement that would change everything. "Nathan, dear," she said during breakfast, her voice sweet as poisoned honey, "I have a wonderful surprise for you. Isabella Montgomery arrives this afternoon to stay with us for a few weeks." Emily, who was removing plates from the table, felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the fine porcelain, and she prayed that no one would notice. Nathan raised his eyes from the newspaper he was reading, his expression carefully neutral. "Isabella? Here?" "Yes. She's eager to get to know you better, and I thought it would be perfect. You'll have time to talk, to get to know each other properly." Victoria smiled with satisfaction. "And to celebrate her presence, I'm going to host her gala ball next week. It will be the social event of the season." Emily's heart sank even further. Isabella Montgomery. She had heard this name whispered in the social circles of Boston's high society. A brilliant businesswoman, heiress to a fortune in agribusiness, educated in business administration in France. Everything that Emily could never be. "A ball?" repeated Nathan, and Emily noticed an almost imperceptible tension in his voice. "Yes, it's been years since we've given a proper party in this house. It will be the perfect opportunity for you to present yourselves as a couple to society." Victoria clapped her hands, excited about her own plans. "Emily, I want you to organize everything. Decoration, menu, guest list, and make sure everything is perfect." Emily nodded mechanically, but inside she felt as if she were disintegrating. Organizing a ball to celebrate the engagement of the man she loved. The irony was too cruel even for Victoria. "I'll make a list of what we need," she managed to say. "Excellent. Oh, and Emily," Victoria stopped her when she was almost leaving. "The room, I want you to prepare the blue room for Isabella, the best guest room. She should feel completely at home here." The blue room was in the same corridor as Nathan's room. Victoria's message was clear. Emily should understand her place in the hierarchy, and that place was far, very far, from the Blackwood heir. Isabella arrived in a black limousine that shone under the afternoon sun like an expensive jewel. Emily observed from the library window as the woman exited the car with the grace of a ballerina and the confidence of a queen. She was beautiful in a devastating way, blonde hair tied in a sophisticated chignon, perfect skin, beige linen dress that must have cost more than Emily earned in a year. She moved as if she owned the world, and perhaps she did. Victoria received her in the main hall with theatrical effusiveness, presenting her to Nathan as if she were a rare work of art. Emily remained in the shadows, as always, observing the scene unfold like a slow-motion nightmare. "Nathan, what a pleasure to finally meet you," said Isabella, extending a gloved hand, that he politely kissed. "Victoria talks so much about you that I feel as if we were already old friends." Her voice was cultivated, with a slight French accent that she must have developed during her years of study in Europe. Each word sounded like music, refined and seductive. "The pleasure is mine," replied Nathan, but Emily noticed that his smile didn't reach his eyes. "I hope you don't mind my extended visit. Victoria insisted that I stay to get to know the family and the business better. I have some interesting ideas about international partnerships that could be advantageous for both companies." Of course, Isabella wasn't just beautiful and rich, but also intelligent and ambitious. The type of woman Victoria had always dreamed of for Nathan, the type of woman Emily could never compete with. "Emily," called Victoria, noticing her presence. "In the shadows, come here, I want to introduce you to Isabella." Emily approached with hesitant steps, feeling miserable in her simple grey cotton dress next to Isabella's ethereal elegance. "Isabella, this is Emily. She takes care of the house for us." "How charming," said Isabella, examining Emily from head to toe with eyes as cold as diamonds. "A domestic caretaker. How traditional." There was subtle contempt in the way she pronounced the words, as if Emily were an interesting anthropological curiosity, but fundamentally inferior. "Emily will organize our gala ball," continued Victoria. "She has a special talent for domestic services." The humiliation burned in Emily's chest like acid. She kept her eyes lowered, biting her tongue to avoid responding the way she would like to. "How wonderful," said Isabella, without an ounce of sincerity. "I'm sure it will be adequate." Nathan remained silent during the entire interaction, but Emily could feel his eyes on her. When she finally raised her gaze, she found him observing her with an expression that she couldn't completely decipher. There was anger there, but also something that seemed like an apology. "Well," said Victoria, clapping her hands again, "why don't we show Isabella to her room? I'm sure you're tired from the journey." They climbed the stairs together, Victoria chattering about the house decoration and plans for the ball, while Isabella made polite but clearly disinterested comments. Emily followed them at a respectful distance, carrying the fine leather suitcases that she hadn't even offered to take. The blue room was impeccable as always. Emily had spent the entire morning ensuring that every detail was perfect, from the fresh flowers in the vase to the Egyptian silk sheets that Victoria kept for special occasions. "What a charming room," said Isabella, examining the environment with critical eyes. "Very traditional." Again that word. Traditional in Isabella's mouth sounded like a synonym for antiquated, outdated, inferior. "Emily, draw a bath for our guest," ordered Victoria. "Isabella, dear, rest a bit. We'll dine at 8, and then we can talk about your plans to expand your business." Emily went to the bathroom attached to the room, a luxurious environment with a marble bathtub and golden faucets. As the water ran, she couldn't help but imagine Isabella and Nathan together, talking about business and sharing the kind of intellectual intimacy that she could never offer. "You can go now," said Isabella behind her, her voice as sharp as a razor. "I'm sure you have more tasks to complete." Emily turned to leave, but was stopped by the cold voice of the woman. "Oh, and Emily." Isabella was standing at the bathroom door, already removing her expensive gloves. "I hope you understand that certain fantasies are exactly that. Fantasies. Nathan is a man with responsibilities, a future to build. He cannot afford the luxury of being distracted by inappropriate entertainment." Emily's blood froze, Isabella knew. Somehow she had perceived the tension between Emily and Nathan, had identified the threat she represented. "I don't know what you're talking about," she managed to say. Isabella laughed, a crystalline and cruel sound. "Of course you do. I'm a woman, Emily. I recognize the look of a rival when I see one, but you need to understand something. You are not a rival. You are a curiosity, a pastime, and curiosities go out of fashion. Very quickly." Emily left the room with her face burning with anger and humiliation. Isabella wasn't just marking territory, she was declaring war, and worse still, she was doing this with the confidence of someone who had already won before the battle even began. That night during dinner, Emily was forced to watch the spectacle of Isabella seducing not just Nathan, but the entire atmosphere of the house. She spoke intelligently about international economics, contemporary art and politics, keeping Victoria fascinated and Nathan at least politely interested. Emily served the table in silence, invisible as always, but observing every nuance of the interaction. Isabella touched Nathan's arm when she made a joke, leaned slightly in his direction when he spoke, smiled in a way that transformed her already beautiful face into something almost hypnotizing. And Nathan. Nathan was polite, attentive, the perfect gentleman, but Emily noticed that he avoided looking directly at her, as if her presence were an uncomfortable reminder of complications he preferred to forget. After dinner, when Victoria suggested that the three of them have a last glass of wine in the living room, Emily withdrew to her room. She couldn't bear to watch that for another minute. She spent the night awake, alternating between anger and despair. Perhaps Isabella was right. Perhaps she was just a fantasy, a distraction for Nathan, while he didn't have real responsibilities to assume. Now that the real world had arrived in the form of a perfect and suitable woman, perhaps he would realize how foolish he had been to become emotionally involved with a simple servant. The following days were a refined torture. Isabella established herself in the house as if she were the owner, commanding minor reforms in the decoration, suggesting changes to the menu, treating Emily with a polite condescension that was worse than any open rudeness. Nathan seemed to be gradually moving away, spending more time in meetings outside the house, avoiding the intimate moments they had shared in the first days after his return. When they met in the corridors, he would only nod politely as if he were a stranger. It was during a particularly difficult afternoon, while Emily was organizing the preparations for the gala ball that was being planned for the following weekend, that she made a decision that would change everything. She was in the basement of the house, looking for old decorations that Victoria had mentioned, when she discovered a wing that she had never fully explored. It was Nathan's grandfather's old studio, an environment that had been closed since his death 15 years ago. The door was locked, but Emily found the key hidden behind a dusty painting in the corridor. When she opened it, she was greeted by the smell of old paint and yellowed paper. The studio was like a time capsule. Easels still held half-finished canvases. Brushes were scattered on tables covered by white sheets, and the walls were decorated with portraits and landscapes that showed considerable artistic talent. But it was at a desk in the corner of the room that Emily made the discovery that would change her life forever. Inside a secret drawer, similar to the one she had found in Nathan's room, there was a collection of letters tied with a faded red ribbon. Passionate love letters written in two different handwritings, one masculine and elegant, the other delicate and feminine. Emily's hands trembled when she recognized the feminine handwriting. It was her mother's. With her heart racing, she read, letter after letter, discovering a story of forbidden love that perfectly mirrored her own situation. Nathan's grandfather, Vincent Blackwood, and her mother Mary had loved each other with a passion that defied social conventions, class differences, and family expectations. But there was more. In a letter dated just 2 months before her mother's death, Mary wrote about a terrible secret she had discovered about Victoria, something that could destroy the Blackwood family's reputation forever. My dear Vincent, the letter said, I discovered the truth about what happened to Caroline West. Victoria not only knew she orchestrated everything, the photos, the blackmail, the suicide. I have proof now, documents that she thought she had destroyed, but I cannot use them against her while Emily is under her roof. If something ever happens to me, promise that you will protect our girl. Promise that she will know the truth about who she really is. Emily read the letter 3 times before the full meaning hit her. Her mother had discovered that Victoria was involved in the death of someone named Caroline West, and she had proof. She searched the rest of the secret drawer with renewed urgency, looking for the documents her mother mentioned. At the bottom, she found a sealed envelope with her name written in Mary's delicate handwriting. Inside was a letter addressed to her and a small ornate key. My dear Emily, the letter began, if you are reading this, it means something terrible has happened to me, and you have finally discovered this hiding place. The key you will find along with this letter opens a safe at First National Bank Beacon Hill branch. Inside it are the proofs that Victoria Blackwood is responsible for the death of Caroline West 20 years ago. Caroline was my older sister, your aunt, and Victoria killed her because she refused to be blackmailed for an affair she had with a married man from high society. Use these proofs only if your life is in danger, my daughter. Victoria is a dangerous woman, but she is also vulnerable. And you, Emily, you are stronger than you imagine. You are a West, and our family has never bowed before tyrants. Emily sat heavily on a dusty chair, trying to process the avalanche of revelations. Her mother wasn't Mary Sanders Wilson. She was Mary West, and she had an aunt who had been murdered by Victoria 20 years before. More than that, her mother had left evidence that could completely destroy Victoria. The sound of footsteps in the corridor brought her back to reality. She quickly put all the letters and the key in the pocket of her dress, closed the secret drawer and left the studio, locking the door behind her. When she reached the main floor, she found Isabella and Victoria animatedly discussing the floral arrangements for the ball. "Oh, Emily," said Victoria upon seeing her, "I was looking for you. Isabella had a wonderful idea for the decoration of the main hall." "Yes," said Isabella, her eyes shining with barely disguised malice. "I thought it would be charming to have a theme of past and present, celebrating the Blackwood family traditions while embracing the future." She smiled at Victoria. And what better way to symbolize this than having the house employee dressed in period clothes, as an interesting contrast with the modern guests. Emily felt her blood boil. Isabella wanted to humiliate her publicly, transform her into part of the decoration as if she were a curious object. "What a creative idea," said Victoria, clearly delighted. "Emily, you can use one of the old clothes that are stored in the attic. It will be very picturesque." "Actually," said Emily, surprising herself with the firmness of her own voice, "I have a different idea." Both women looked at her with surprise. Emily rarely offered suggestions, much less contradicted already established plans. "I have a dress that belonged to my mother. A black party dress, very elegant. I would like to wear it in her honor, if you'll allow me." Victoria frowned. "Emily, this is not an event for you to use as a personal memorial." "On the contrary," interrupted Isabella, her eyes shining with predatory interest, "I think it's a wonderful idea. I'm sure it will be very appropriate." Emily realized that Isabella was imagining exactly the opposite. She expected Emily's mother's dress to be simple, inadequate, a way to highlight even more the contrast between them. "Perfect then," said Emily. "Thank you for allowing me to participate in an appropriate manner." That night, Emily went up to the attic with a flashlight, searching among dusty trunks until she found what she was looking for. Her mother's dress was stored in a wooden box, wrapped in tissue paper yellowed by time. When she unfolded it, Emily lost her breath. It wasn't the simple dress that Victoria and Isabella imagined. It was a piece of French haute couture, in black, silk with delicate embroidery and silver thread. The cut was timeless, elegant, sophisticated. It was the type of dress a woman would wear to seduce a powerful man, to compete on equal terms with the social elite. Along with the dress was a small, leather-bound diary, different from the one she had found in Nathan's room. This contained more intimate thoughts of her mother, reflections on her true identity as Mary West, and her plans to reveal the truth about Victoria. And in the last entry, a revelation that made Emily's heart stop. "Vincent told me today that Victoria discovered our correspondence. She threatened not only to expel me from the house, but to do something terrible to Emily if I didn't stop seeing him. But I have my own weapons now, the proof about Caroline. If she touches me, if she hurts my daughter, the whole world will know what Victoria Blackwood really is." Emily closed the diary with trembling hands. Her mother hadn't died of disease. Victoria had killed her just as she had killed Caroline West. And now, with the proof hidden in the bank and the truth about her identity finally revealed, Emily had the power to destroy the woman who had ruined her life. The gala ball would be in 3 days. It would be the perfect opportunity to expose Victoria publicly in front of all of Boston's high society. But this would also mean destroying Nathan, tarnishing the name of the family he loved, even with all its flaws. Emily spent the next 48 hours tormented by the decision she had to make. She continued organizing the ball with mechanical efficiency, supervising the decoration, the menu, the guest list. But her mind was constantly turned to the black dress hidden in her room and to the key that could open a safe full of deadly secrets. It was on the eve of the ball that Nathan finally sought her out. Emily was in the garden, checking the flower, arrangements that would be used in the external decoration, when she felt a presence behind her. She turned and found Nathan standing in the shadow of a tree, his hands buried in the pockets of dark dress pants. "We need to talk," he said, without preamble. Emily looked around, checking if they were alone. "About what?" "About what's happening between us. About Isabella, about this game we're playing." He approached, and Emily could see the tension in his face. "I can't pretend anymore that I don't feel anything for you." "Funny," she said, her voice laden with bitterness, "because you've been doing an excellent job pretending exactly that in the last few days." Nathan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration that she remembered from his youth. "Emily, you don't understand the pressure I'm under. Victoria threatens not only to disinherit me, but also to make your life a living hell if I don't behave appropriately with Isabella." "And you believe her?" "I know my grandmother. She is capable of terrible things when she doesn't get what she wants." Nathan looked at her intensely. "She has already done enough harm to your family. I cannot allow her to do more." Emily felt a bitter laugh escape her lips. "How noble of you, Nathan, sacrificing our feelings to protect me from Victoria's wrath." "It's not sacrifice if it's necessary," he said, closing the distance between them in 2 large strides. "It's love." The words hit her like lightning. Nathan was so close now that she could feel the heat of his body, the masculine cologne that made her dizzy. "You have no idea what love is," she whispered. "Love is not giving up without a fight." Love is not accepting the destiny that others choose for you. And what do you suggest I do? He asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. Openly confront Victoria? Risk not only my future, but yours too? Emily looked into Nathan's green eyes and made her decision. Trust me, she said. Just trust me. Before he could respond, she moved away, running back to the house as if pursued by demons. Because in a way, that was exactly what was happening. That would be the last night that Emily Sanders Wilson would spend in the shadows. The next day, at the gala ball that she herself had organized, she would reveal herself as Emily West, granddaughter of a woman murdered by Victoria Blackwood, daughter of a woman who had died defending the truth. And if this meant losing Nathan forever, at least she would have dignity. At least she would have honored the memory of her mother and her aunt. The black dress was waiting for her in her room like a suit of armor, and the key to the safe burned in her pocket like a promise of justice. On the morning of the ball, Emily woke with a strange calmness. It was as if a storm had finally passed, leaving behind a crystalline silence that precedes seismic changes. She showered calmly, brushed her hair until it shone like brown silk, and began to prepare for the event that would change her life forever. When she put on her mother's black silk dress, Emily barely recognized the woman looking back at her in the mirror. The dress molded to her body as if it had been made especially for her, highlighting curves she didn't even know she had. The neckline was elegant without being vulgar. The skirt flowed like black water around her legs. She let her hair down, something she never did, allowing it to fall in soft waves over her shoulders. She found a dark red lipstick in her mother's old makeup case and applied it carefully, transforming her mouth into a silent declaration of war. When she finished, Emily was no longer the invisible shadow she had been for 28 years. She was a woman who knew her own power, who carried dangerous secrets and was no longer afraid to use them. The main hall of the mansion had been transformed into a work of art. Crystal chandeliers bathed the environment in golden light. White and silver flowers decorated every surface, and a small orchestra was being prepared in a corner of the immense room. The first guests began to arrive at nightfall, members of Boston's elite dressed in their best attire, eager to see the presentation of the new couple formed by Nathan Blackwood and Isabella Montgomery. Emily remained in the shadows during the first hour, observing Victoria circulate through the party like a queen receiving vassals, Isabella dazzling in a golden dress that cost more than many people earned in an entire lifetime, and Nathan fulfilling his role as a polite but clearly uncomfortable host. It was when the hall was full and conversations flowed along with the expensive champagne that Emily finally descended the main staircase. The silence spread through the hall like waves on a tranquil lagoon. Heads turned, conversations ceased, and all eyes turned to the mysterious woman in a black dress who descended the stairs like an apparition from another time. Victoria visibly paled upon recognizing the dress. Isabella narrowed her eyes, instinctively perceiving that her absolute dominion over the night was being challenged. And Nathan completely lost his breath. Emily saw the exact moment when he recognized her, saw his eyes widen in surprise, and something that seemed like reverence. She was no longer the humble servant he knew. She was a magnificent, powerful, dangerous woman. Emily walked through the hall toward the small stage where the orchestra was playing, each step calculated, each movement a declaration of intent. People automatically moved out of her way as if they sensed that something momentous was about to happen. When she reached the stage, she gestured for the music to stop. The silence was absolute. "Good evening," said Emily, her clear and firm voice echoing through the silent hall. "My name is Emily West, and I have a story to tell." The silence in the hall was so dense that Emily could hear the beating of her own heart. 200 people from Boston's elite observed her, with a mixture of curiosity and poorly disguised scandal. No one spoke like this at a Blackwood family event. No one dared to interrupt a party to make mysterious declarations. But Emily was no longer no one. She was a West, and she had a blood debt to settle. 20 years ago, she began, her voice echoing clearly through the hall, A young woman named Caroline West was found dead in her apartment in downtown Boston. The police determined it was suicide, depression, they said. A single woman without close family who couldn't handle the pressures of life. Victoria took a step forward, her face contorted in a mask of barely contained fury. "Emily, what do you think you're doing? Stop this immediately." But Emily didn't stop. If anything, Victoria's reaction only confirmed that she was on the right track. "But Caroline didn't kill herself," she continued, her eyes scanning the hall, and finding each face, each expression of growing shock. "She was murdered because she refused to be blackmailed by Victoria Blackwood." A collective murmur ran through the crowd like a wave. Emily saw important businessmen whispering among themselves, socialites covering their mouths with expensive fans, young people from high society discreetly recording with their cell phones. Caroline had become romantically involved with a married man from the social elite. When Victoria discovered this, she saw an opportunity for profit. She tried to blackmail my aunt, demanding money in exchange for keeping the secret. Emily paused, letting the word aunt cause the desired impact. When Caroline refused to pay, Victoria killed her and staged the suicide scene. "This is an absurd lie," shouted Victoria, her composure finally shattering. This disturbed creature is clearly having a psychotic break. Someone needs to stop her." Several men began to move in the direction of the stage, but Nathan placed himself in their path, raising a hand to stop them. His eyes were fixed on Emily, a complex mixture of admiration, terror, and something that seemed like pride. "Let her speak," he said, his voice low but authoritative. "I want to hear what she has to say." Victoria turned to her grandson with flaming eyes. "Nathan, you can't be taking these accusations seriously." "I'm taking them very seriously," he replied, without taking his eyes off Emily. "Continue." Emily felt a wave of courage go through her. Nathan was on her side, even without completely knowing what was to come. "Caroline West was my aunt," declared Emily, "and the woman you knew as Mary Sanders Wilson, who worked in this house for years before mysteriously dying, was my mother. Her real name was Mary West." The silence returned to reign, but now it was a silence charged with electrical tension. Emily saw Victoria retreat slightly, as if she had taken a physical blow. "Mary discovered the truth about Caroline's murder," continued Emily, removing a folded paper from the bodice of the dress. "She found evidence, documents that Victoria thought she had destroyed, photographs, bank records showing suspicious payments made at the time of Caroline's death." She unfolded the paper with steady hands, although her heart was racing. "This is a copy of a letter that my mother wrote to Vincent Blackwood shortly before her death, a letter where she explains exactly how Victoria killed Caroline and how she planned to use this information to protect herself. Victoria was now as pale as a ghost. "You can't prove any of this. These are delusions of a dead woman, fantasies." "Yes, I can," said Emily calmly. "Because my mother was smart enough to keep all the evidence in a bank safe, a safe that is at First National Bank, Beacon Hill branch, and for which I have the key." She removed the small golden key from her pocket, raising it for all to see. The light from the chandeliers made the metal shine like fire. Inside that safe are photographs of Victoria entering and leaving Caroline's apartment on the night of her death. There are bank records showing that she paid the doorman to lie about who had visited Caroline. There is a partial confession that Victoria wrote but never sent, detailing how she forced my aunt to take poison. The hall exploded in agitated conversations. Emily saw discreet reporters taking furious notes, shocked socialites whispering, businessmen exchanging significant looks. The scandal was spreading like fire in a dry forest. "And there's more," said Emily, raising her voice above the buzz. "Because when my mother threatened to expose these crimes, Victoria killed her too, slowly poisoning her food for weeks, making it look like a debilitating disease." Isabella, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. "This is complete madness. Emily, you clearly need psychiatric help." "Do I really?" asked Emily, turning to Isabella with a cold smile. "Or are you afraid that the scandal will affect your marriage plans? After all, who would want to associate with a family whose matriarch is a serial killer?" Isabella retreated as if she had been slapped. Emily saw the exact moment when the woman realized that her dreams of becoming a Blackwood had just turned to ashes. "Enough!" roared Victoria, climbing onto the stage with surprising agility for her age. "I will not allow this unbalanced bastard to destroy everything I've built." She tried to snatch the key from Emily's hands, but Nathan moved like lightning, grabbing his grandmother's wrist before she could touch Emily. "Don't touch her," he said, his voice dangerously low. Victoria looked at her grandson as if he were a stranger. "Nathan, you don't understand. She's lying. These are all inventions of a disturbed mind." "I'm beginning to understand very well," said Nathan slowly. "I understand why you always told me to stay away from Emily, why you insisted so much that I marry someone suitable. You were afraid that I would discover the truth." "What truth?" asked Emily, sensing that there were more revelations to come. Nathan faced her with a strange expression, a mixture of pain and discovery. "The truth about who you really are, Emily, about why my grandfather fell in love with your mother." Victoria tried to free herself from Nathan's grip, but he held her firmly. "Nathan, don't—" "Mary West wasn't just a servant my grandfather fell in love with by chance," said Nathan, ignoring Victoria's protests. "She was his half-sister." The hall fell into deathly silence. Emily felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. "What?" she whispered. "My great-grandfather had an affair with your grandmother years before marrying my great-grandmother," explained Nathan, his words falling like bombs in the tense silence. "Mary and Caroline were illegitimate daughters of the Blackwood family, which makes you your second cousin," finished Emily, her voice barely managing to come out. Victoria finally managed to free herself from Nathan's grip, retreating like a cornered animal. "This doesn't matter. They were bastards. They had no right to anything." "They had the right to life," said Emily, feeling a cold anger spreading through her chest. "They had the right to the truth, and they had the right to justice." She turned to the hall full of fascinated spectators. "For 28 years I lived in this house as a shadow, being treated as an intruder tolerated out of charity. But I am not an intruder. I am a Blackwood by right of blood, as was my mother, and Victoria murdered 2 women from our family to keep this a secret." "You can't prove anything," shouted Victoria, but her voice now sounded desperate, no longer authoritative. "They're just stories, fantasies." Emily descended from the stage slowly, walking toward the matriarch with the grace of a predator. "I can prove everything, and I will. Tomorrow morning I will go to the bank with this key, retrieve all the evidence my mother kept and deliver it to the police." Victoria stared at her with pure hatred. "You think anyone will believe the word of a servant against mine? You think you have any real power?" "I have the truth," said Emily simply, "and unlike you, I'm not afraid of it." It was then that Victoria smiled, an icy and cruel expression that made Emily's blood freeze. "You are clearly suffering from a severe psychotic." "Crisis?" said Victoria, her voice returning to being calculated and cold. "Persecutory. Delusions, paranoid fantasies, erratic behavior. Dr. Miller." A middle-aged man stepped out from the crowd, carrying a leather briefcase. Emily recognized him as the family's private psychiatrist, a man whom Victoria had kept in her pocket for decades. "Yes, Victoria," he said, opening the briefcase. "I have here a compulsory psychiatric commitment order already signed. Emily Sanders Wilson represents a danger to herself and others." Emily felt a terror so intense that it almost made her dizzy. "This is illegal. You can't—" "We can, and we will," said Victoria triumphantly. 2 private security guards entered the hall discreetly, positioning themselves strategically near the exits. "You will be admitted to a very discreet private clinic, where you will receive appropriate treatment for your mental disturbances." "No!" shouted Nathan, stepping forward. "I won't allow this." "You have no choice," said Victoria coldly. "Either you stay quiet and let this happen, or I guarantee that Emily will suffer an accident much worse than an admission." Emily saw the moment when Nathan understood that his grandmother was serious. Victoria was really capable of killing Emily if necessary, just as she had killed Mary and Caroline. "Nathan," said Emily, touching his arm lightly, "it's okay." "It's not okay," he said desperately. "I'm not going to let her do this to you." "You have no choice," repeated Emily, echoing Victoria's words. But her eyes conveyed a different message: confidence, determination, a plan. The security guards approached, but Emily raised a hand to stop them. "No need for violence, I'll go voluntarily." Victoria looked surprised. "Very wise of you." "I just want to say one last thing," said Emily, turning back to the hall full of shocked guests, "for everyone to hear and remember." She walked back, to the center of the hall, her clear and firm voice echoing throughout the environment. "My name is Emily West. I'm the granddaughter of Caroline West, daughter of Mary West, and second cousin of Nathan Blackwood. Victoria Blackwood murdered my aunt and my mother to hide the fact that we are family, and now she is trying to silence me in the same way." She paused, letting each word be etched into the minds of those present. "If anything happens to me, if I die in the psychiatric clinic or have an accident, remember what you heard here today. The key to the safe at First National Bank is with my lawyer, Dr. Robert Smith, along with instructions to open it if I don't appear at his office by Monday." Emily saw Victoria's face pale again. She had lied about the lawyer, but the matriarch had no way of knowing that. "And for you, Victoria," said Emily, facing the woman directly, "I want you to know that I'm no longer afraid. My mother died haunted by what you did, but I will not die in silence." With that, she turned to the security guards and extended her wrists. "You can take me." As she was escorted out of the hall, Emily heard the buzz of conversations exploding behind her. The scandal was planted, the seeds of doubt were germinating. Even if Victoria managed to silence her temporarily, the truth had been told in front of too many witnesses to be completely suppressed. Nathan tried to follow her, but Victoria stopped him with an icy word. "If you leave this room after her, Nathan, you will be immediately disinherited, and she will suffer the consequences." Emily saw the agony in his face, but also saw when he understood that he needed to play Victoria's game for now, for her sake. "Trust me," she murmured as she passed him, repeating the words she had said in the garden. The private psychiatric clinic was located in the west side of Boston, hidden behind high walls and impeccable gardens that masked its true nature, a prison for rich and inconvenient people. Emily was installed in a suite that seemed luxurious at first glance, but quickly revealed its prison characteristics: windows that didn't open, doorknobs that locked from the outside, discreet cameras in each corner. Dr. Miller came to visit her the following morning, bringing a clipboard full of forms and an oily smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Emily," he said, sitting in a fake leather armchair, "I came to talk about your treatment. Victoria told me about your recent episodes." "You mean about me telling the truth about the murders she committed?" asked Emily calmly. "See? Exactly this kind of paranoid delusion that we need to treat," he said, noting something on the clipboard. "I'm going to prescribe some medications that will help you feel more calm." Emily knew that the medications were to drug her, to keep her docile and confused until Victoria could decide how to get rid of her permanently. "Doctor," she said, leaning forward with a sweet smile, "may I ask a question?" "Of course." "How much is Victoria paying you to do this? Because she's already paid you to lie before about the cause of my mother's death, for example." The man turned pale. "I almost don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you do. You signed Mary West's death certificate, declaring death from natural causes when in fact she was slowly poisoned." Emily leaned, back in the armchair, observing the sweat forming on the man's forehead. "That makes you an accomplice to murder, Doctor. I hope Victoria is paying well enough to compensate for a life sentence." Dr. Miller stood up abruptly, dropping some papers. "In the process. You're delirious. You need medication immediately." But Emily saw the fear in his eyes. He knew she was telling the truth, and that terrified him. That night, a nurse came to her room with a food tray and a glass of water, with 2 white pills beside it. "Evening medication," the woman said robotically. Emily took the pills and pretended to put them in her mouth, taking a sip of water. When the nurse left, She spat the pills into the palm of her hand and threw them out the bathroom window. She wasn't going to allow them to drug her. She needed to keep her mind clear for what she was planning. For 3 days, Emily played their game. She pretended to take the medication, behaved in a docile manner during consultations with Dr. Miller, answered the other doctors' questions with the submission they expected. But during the nights, when the lights went out and the corridors became silent, she explored her prison. She tested locks, memorized the guards' routine, studied the weak points of the security system. The clinic had been designed to keep rich and crazy people inside, not to prevent the escape of someone determined and completely sane. On the 4th night, Emily put her plan into action. She waited until the night shift change, when there was only one sleepy guard at the reception, and the night shift nurse was making her rounds on the upper floor. She had discovered that the window in the bathroom of her room had a defective lock, something that the builders probably never imagined anyone would try to exploit on the 3rd floor, but Emily had climbed trees in the Blackwood Mansion garden throughout her childhood. Height didn't scare her. She tied the sheets into an improvised rope, secured one end to the bathroom sink and tested its strength. It wasn't ideal, but it would be enough to descend to the 2nd floor, where she could access the roof of the administrative wing. 20 minutes later, Emily was running through the dark streets of Boston, free for the first time in a week, her heart racing from adrenaline and the certainty that Victoria would notice her escape in a few hours. She needed to leave the city. She needed time to think, to plan her next move, and she knew exactly where to go. The fishing village of Rockport had been her mother's refuge in the last months of her life. Mary had taken Emily there a few times when she was a child, telling her stories about how her fisherman grandfather used to work in those waters before he died. Emily took the first morning bus to the North Shore, paying for the ticket with money she had hidden in the lining of her clothes before being admitted. During the 4-hour journey, she tried to process everything that had happened in the last few days. She had publicly exposed Victoria. She had revealed her true identity. She had discovered that she was Nathan's cousin, and she had escaped an attempt to permanently silence her. But what would come next? Victoria would use all her influence to discredit her accusations, to make it seem that everything had been nothing more than the delusions of a mentally disturbed woman. Without the evidence from the bank safe, it would be her word against that, of one of Boston's most powerful matriarchs. And Nathan. Emily tried not to think about Nathan, about how he had defended her in the hall, about how he had tried to protect her even knowing the cost, about how his eyes had shone when he saw her descending those stairs like a warrior queen. She arrived in Rockport in the middle of the afternoon, the summer sun bathing the small fishing village in a golden light that made everything seem like a dream. She rented a small room in a simple inn on the beach, using a false name and paying in cash. During the first weeks, Emily simply existed. She walked on the beach at dawn, ate fresh fish in local restaurants, read books borrowed from the small-town library. She let her hair grow longer, the sun darken her skin, the sea salt heal the wounds in her soul. Gradually, she began to interact with the local community. She offered to teach English and literature at the municipal school, helped organize the small library, wrote stories for the village children. For the first time in her life, Emily was living for herself, not as a shadow in someone else's house, not as a tolerated intruder, but as an independent woman who made her own decisions. But, still in the silent nights when she lay in the simple bed listening to the sound of the waves, her thoughts invariably returned to Nathan. She wondered if he had tried to look for her, if Victoria had managed to convince him that she was really crazy, if he had married Isabella to calm the scandal. Was on a Saturday morning 2 months after her escape that Emily was organizing books in the library when she heard a familiar voice at the door. "Excuse me, I'm looking for a teacher named Ellen Watson." Emily turned slowly, her heart completely stopping when she saw Nathan standing at the entrance of the small library, wearing faded jeans and a simple white shirt that made him look years younger. He was different, thinner, with deep circles under his eyes that suggested sleepless nights, but his green eyes shone with a determination that she had never seen before. "Nathan," she whispered, her voice barely managing to come out. "Emily." He took a step into the library, closing the door behind him. "Do you have any idea how long it took me to find you?" She couldn't answer. She simply stood there, holding a copy of Hemingway against her chest like a shield, trying to process the fact that he was there, in front of her, real and solid like a miracle. 2 months, he continued, approaching slowly as if she were a wild animal that might run away at any moment. 2 months looking for you. I hired private detectives, searched hotel records, followed false leads across 3 different states. "How did you find me?" she finally asked. "A child in town mentioned the new teacher who tells the most incredible stories about princesses who fight against evil queens. Said she has the saddest eyes, but the most beautiful smile." Nathan stopped just an arm's length away from her. "I knew immediately it was you." Emily felt tears beginning to burn her eyes. "Nathan, you shouldn't be here. Victoria." "Victoria is in prison," he said simply. The book fell from Emily's hands. "What?" 3 weeks after you disappeared, the police received an anonymous tip about a safe at First National Bank containing evidence of murder. Someone had sent a copy of the key, along with detailed instructions about what they would find there. Emily stared at him in disbelief. "But I never—" "No, you never went to the bank. But your mother was much smarter than anyone imagined." Nathan smiled for the first time since he had entered the library. "She didn't keep just one key, Emily. She made copies. And she left one with someone she trusted, with instructions to open the safe if anything happened to you." "Who?" "Mrs. Carter, the cook of the house. She knew about everything from the beginning. Your mother had told her the truth before she died, asking her to protect you if necessary." Emily sat heavily in a nearby chair, her legs failing. "Mrs. Carter knew?" "She knew. And when you disappeared from the clinic, when Victoria started spreading that you had died during a psychotic break, Mrs. Carter decided it was time to act." Nathan knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "The evidence in the safe was exactly what you said it was. Photographs, documents, partial confessions. Enough proof to condemn Victoria for 2 first-degree murders." Emily couldn't believe what she was hearing. "And did she confess?" "When confronted with the evidence, yes. She tried to plead temporary insanity, but no one believed it. A woman who meticulously planned 2 murders over 20 years is not insane. She's calculating and cruel." Nathan squeezed her hands. "She was sentenced to life in prison." The tears finally began to fall down Emily's face. Tears of relief, of justice finally done, of a pain that she had carried throughout her entire life finally being recognized and validated. "And you?" she asked between sobs. "What happened to you, to Isabella?" Nathan laughed, but there was bitterness in the sound. "Isabella disappeared the moment the scandal exploded. Apparently she wasn't so interested in marrying someone whose grandmother was a convicted murderer. Who would have thought?" "Nathan, I'm so sorry." "Don't be," he said firmly. "You did the right thing, Emily. The brave thing. You fought for the truth when no one else would. You honored the memory of your mother and your aunt, and you freed me from a life that was never really mine." Emily looked at him through the tears. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I spent 2 months confronting everything I thought I knew about my family, about my place in the world, about what really matters." Nathan stood up and extended his hand to her. "Come with me. There's something I want to show you." He guided her out of the library toward the beach, where the waves broke softly on the golden sand. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that made everything look like an impressionist painting. "When I found out that Victoria had been arrested, that all the truth had finally come to light, my first reaction was relief," said Nathan, stopping at the water's edge. "But then came something else. Emptiness. Because I realized that none of this mattered if you weren't with me." Emily felt her heart accelerate. "Nathan, I love you." "Emily, not as the servant who grew up in my house, not as the distant cousin I discovered you are, but as the brave woman who faced a room full of powerful people and told the truth even knowing it could cost her life. He turned to face her completely. "I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I deserve the love you feel for me." "And if I no longer know what I feel?" asked Emily, her voice trembling. "And if these 2 months have changed me? And if I'm no longer the same person who fell in love with you?" Nathan smiled, and this time the smile reached his eyes, transforming his face into something luminous and young. "Then I'll fall in love with who you've become, and with who you will yet become, because, Emily, you are no longer a shadow. You are pure light." He extended his hand to her again, and this time Emily took it without hesitation. "If I say yes," she said slowly, "if I accept starting over with you, it will be from zero. No mansions, no inheritances, no privileges, just the two of us building something real and honest. There's no other way I would want it more," he said, intertwining his fingers with hers. "By the way, I need to tell you something. I renounced all the Blackwood inheritance. I donated everything to charities. I want to start my own life, earn my own money, build my own legacy." Emily looked at him with surprise. "Nathan, you didn't have to." "Yes, I did. That money was stained with blood, Emily. Your family's blood. I couldn't live with it." He brought her hand to his lips, gently kissing her fingers. "Besides, a public school teacher has very specific living standards. I need to adapt." For the first time in a long time, Emily laughed, a genuine laugh full of joy and possibility. "So," said Nathan, his green eyes shining with hope, "answer me one question. If I'm not the man they expected for you, if I'm just Nathan, without a last name, without money, without power, would you still choose me?" Emily looked into the eyes of the man she had known as an unreachable prince, whom she had lost as a coward, and whom she had found again as an equal. She saw in them not the spoiled young man who had left for London, but a man who had faced the hardest truths about his family and chosen the path of honesty. "Yes," she said simply, 1,000 times yes. And there on the beach in Rockport, with the sun setting on the horizon and the waves singing an ancient song of hope, Emily West and Nathan Blackwood kissed for the first time as free people, as equals, as two survivors of a dark past who had chosen to build a bright future together. The first days of Nathan in Rockport were like watching a prince learn to be a commoner. Emily observed with a mixture of tenderness and amusement as he tried to adapt to the simple life of the fishing village, so different from the refined halls and sophisticated businesses of Boston. On the first morning, she found him in the tiny kitchen of the inn where he was staying, looking at an electric coffee maker as if it were an alien artifact. "Need help?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. Nathan turned with an embarrassed smile. "Would you believe I've never made coffee in my life? There was always someone to do it." Emily laughed, approaching to show him how to operate the simple equipment. When their hands touched around the cup, both felt that familiar electricity, but now there was something different. It was no longer the forbidden desire loaded with guilt and impossibility. It was the promise of something real, something they could build together without fear. "I'll have to teach you many things," she said softly. "I'm eager to learn," he replied, his green eyes shining with an intensity that made her stomach turn, in a delicious way. And so began a kind of reverse courtship where Emily taught Nathan the most basic things of daily life. How to buy fresh fish at the municipal market, haggling with Mr. Manson, who had been selling there for 30 years. How to wash clothes by hand when the inn's machine broke. How to cook a simple meal with local ingredients. Nathan absorbed everything, with a thirst for knowledge that surprised Emily. There was no arrogance or impatience in him, just a genuine determination to transform into the man he wanted to be. The man who would deserve her love. "Why are you doing this?" asked Emily one afternoon, as she watched him try to mend a torn fishing net alongside old Mr. Joseph, a 70-year-old fisherman who had become his informal mentor. Nathan's hands, once soft and well cared for, were now calloused and tanned by the sun. "Doing what?" he asked, not raising his eyes from the net, transforming into another person. "You don't need to become a fisherman to impress me, Nathan." He stopped the work and looked at her, a deep seriousness in his face. "I'm not transforming into another person, Emily. I'm becoming who I always should have been. The difference is that now I have the chance to choose who I am." That night, they walked on the beach under the light of the full moon, the waves lapping at their bare feet. They had developed the habit of these night walks, moments when they talked about everything and nothing, truly getting to know each other for the first time. "You know what impresses me most about you," said Nathan, stopping to face her. "What?" "How you don't have anger. After everything Victoria did, everything you lost, how do you manage not to be consumed by bitterness?" Emily thought about the question as she watched the waves breaking on the sand. "I had anger. For years I carried a fury that almost destroyed me from within. But I realized that anger only serves as long as you need it to fight. After the fight ends, it becomes poison." "And when did your fight end?" "The moment I decided to tell the truth at the ball. The moment I stopped being a victim and became a warrior." She turned to him, her hair dancing in the salty wind. "Anger gave me strength to face Victoria. But love gave me courage to start over." Nathan pulled her into his arms then, kissing her with a passion that had grown and matured during these days of mutual discovery. It was no longer the desperate kiss of two forbidden lovers. It was the kiss of two equals who had chosen to build a future together. The weeks turned into months, and life in Rockport created its own rhythm. Emily continued teaching at the municipal school, but now with Nathan at her side, who had offered to teach mathematics and basic economics to the older students. He discovered he had a talent for teaching, a patience and gentleness he had never demonstrated in the family business. They rented a simple little house on the beach with 2 small bedrooms, a living room that also served as a kitchen, and a veranda where they drank coffee every morning watching the sunrise. It was a humble home, but it was theirs. Built with their own hands, their own choices, their own love. It was on one of these tranquil mornings 3 months after Nathan's arrival that Emily woke with a strange feeling of restlessness. She couldn't identify what was bothering her, but there was something in the air, a tension that kept her instincts alert. The answer came in the form of a black, polished car that stopped in front of the municipal school at lunchtime. From it descended a man in a dark suit whom Emily immediately recognized, Dr. Augustus Parker, the personal lawyer of the Blackwood family for more than 20 years. "Miss West," he said, approaching, his voice formal and icy, "I need to speak with you about an urgent matter." Emily felt a chill down her spine. Victoria was in prison, convicted and without possibility of parole. What could this man want with her? "What do you want, Dr. Parker?" "I've come to inform you about a lawsuit being filed against you. Victoria Blackwood, even from her cell, has managed to hire new lawyers. They are claiming that your accusations at the ball were slanderous, that you forged evidence, and that Victoria was convicted based on false proofs." Emily's heart raced. "That's ridiculous. The evidence was real, was it? Because someone gained access to the bank safe 3 days after its official opening. Some important pieces mysteriously disappeared." Dr. Parker smiled coldly. "Without this evidence, Victoria's conviction may be reviewed." Emily felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Who had access to the safe? Someone with a lot of influence and a lot of money. Someone who apparently has an interest in seeing Victoria free again. He adjusted his expensive tie. "But there is a way to make all of this disappear." "What way?" "Victoria is willing to withdraw all charges against you, to peacefully accept her conviction, if you sign a document renouncing any claim to the Blackwood inheritance. Forever." Emily frowned. "What claim? I never—" "You are a Blackwood, by blood, Miss West. Daughter of an illegitimate member of the family, but still with legal rights to part of the family fortune. Victoria wants to make sure you can never claim this money." The truth hit Emily like lightning. This wasn't just about revenge. Victoria was terrified that Emily might use her kinship to claim an inheritance worth millions. Even from prison, she was still trying to protect the family money. "And if I refuse to sign, then Victoria's new lawyers will make your life a living hell. lawsuits for slander, defamation, falsification of evidence. Even if you eventually win all of them, it will take years, and during that time, Dr. Parker looked significantly in the direction of the school. It would be a shame if something happened to this little school, a fire perhaps, or if young Nathan suffered some kind of accident. Emily felt the familiar anger burn in her chest, but this time it was different. It wasn't the desperate anger of the victim. It was the icy fury of a warrior who sees her family being threatened. "Give me the document," she said coldly. Dr. Parker smiled triumphantly, removing an envelope from the briefcase. "Very wise of you." Emily took the envelope, but instead of opening it, she tore it into small pieces, scattering them on the ground at the lawyer's feet. "You can tell Victoria that Emily West is not afraid of her. Not in prison, not outside of it. And if she or any of her henchmen touches a hair on Nathan's head, or of anyone in this town, I personally guarantee that she will never see the light of day again." The man turned pale. "You don't know who you're messing with." "I know exactly who I'm messing with a cowardly murderer who kills innocent women and then tries to hide behind expensive lawyers." Emily took a step forward, and Dr. Parker instinctively retreated. But this time she chose the wrong victim. The lawyer left hurriedly, muttering vague threats as he entered the car. Emily stood in the middle of the street, the fragments of the document scattered at her feet like victory confetti, watching the vehicle disappear in the dust of the fire. When she turned to return to the school, she found Nathan standing at the door, observing her with an expression of admiration and pride. "Did you hear everything?" "Heard?" She asked. "I heard. And I have to say I've never felt so attracted to you as in this moment." He approached, wrapping her in his arms. "My fierce warrior." "Nathan, this means Victoria can still be released, that she can threaten us again." "She can't," said a familiar voice behind them. Both turned and saw Mrs. Carter walking toward them, carrying a small suitcase and a smile that mixed relief with determination. "Mrs. Carter," exclaimed Emily, running to embrace the woman who had been like a second mother to her, "what are you doing here?" "I came to give you something your mother left for you, something that not even Victoria knows exists." Mrs. Carter opened the suitcase and removed a worn leather folder. Mary was much smarter than anyone imagined, including me. Inside the folder were copies of all the evidence that had been in the bank safe, along with documents that Emily had never seen before. Birth certificates that proved the kinship between Mary and Vincent Blackwood. Old wills that mentioned provisions for illegitimate children, and most importantly, a complete handwritten and signed confession from Victoria, detailing not only the murders of Caroline and Mary, but also other crimes she had committed over the years. "How did my mother get this?" I asked Emily with admiration. Victoria wrote this confession on a night when she was very drunk, soon after Mary's death. She was tormented by guilt and wrote everything down, thinking she would destroy the document later. But Mary had bribed the night maid to watch Victoria and managed to get a copy before the original was burned. Nathan examined the documents with growing amazement. This is enough to ensure Victoria is never released, and it also proves that Emily has a legal right to a significant part of the Blackwood inheritance. Emily looked at the papers that could make her rich, that could ensure that she and Nathan would never have to worry about money again. Then she looked at the simple school where she taught, at the humble house they shared, at the honest life they had built together. "I want you to burn it all," she said. Nathan and Mrs. Carter looked at her with surprise. "Emily, are you sure?" asked Nathan. "This money could corrupt us, could transform us into what Victoria was." Emily shook her head firmly. "I don't want her money, Nathan. I don't want anything that comes stained with my family's blood." "And what about the evidence against Victoria?" "That we'll give to the police. It ensures she remains in prison for the rest of her life, but without me having to financially benefit from her crimes." Emily held Nathan's hands. "I want our life to be built only with what we managed to create together, with honest work, true love, and choices we can proudly defend." Nathan kissed her right there, in front of the school, in front of Mrs. Carter, in front of anyone who wanted to see. A kiss full of love, admiration, and the absolute certainty that he had found the most extraordinary woman in the world. Mrs. Carter smiled through the tears. "Mary would be very proud of you, girl." That night, they made a small bonfire on the beach. Emily burned all the documents related to the Blackwood inheritance, watching the flames consume any financial link she might have with that accursed family. The criminal evidence had been delivered to the federal police by Mrs. Carter personally. "Won't you regret it?" asked Nathan as they watched the last embers dying out. "Never," said Emily with absolute conviction. "You know what the difference is between Victoria and us?" "What?" She always believed that power and money were the same thing. But real power comes from other sources. It comes from knowing who you are, from having people who truly love you, from building something that will last long after you're gone. Nathan held her hand, intertwining their fingers. "And what are we building?" Emily smiled, looking at the sea that stretched infinitely before them. "We're building a love story, one that no one will be able to destroy because it's based on truth, on choice, and on the courage to be exactly who we are." The following months passed in a succession of small, perfect moments. Nathan definitively established himself in Rockport, opening a small consulting company to help local fishermen improve their businesses. Emily expanded her activities at the school, creating literacy programs for adults and creative writing workshops. They married in a simple ceremony on the beach, with only Mrs. Carter, some friends from the village, and the school children as witnesses. Emily wore a simple white dress that she herself had bought in a local store, and Nathan wore linen pants and a white shirt, barefoot in the sand like her. There was no orchestra, just old Mr. Joseph playing guitar. There was no elaborate banquet, just a barbecue on the beach with fresh fish and cold beer. There were no expensive presents, just the sincere blessings of people who had learned to love them. But when they looked into each other's eyes and said the vows they had written themselves, when they kissed for the first time as husband and wife while the sun set on the horizon, both knew that there had never existed a more perfect wedding in the history of the world. "I promise to love you not despite who you are, but exactly because of who you are," said Nathan, his voice emotional. "I promise to build our life with you brick by brick, day by day, with my own hands and my own heart. I promise to never again live in the shadows, but always by your side in the light," said Emily, tears of happiness streaming down her face. "I promise that our story will be written by ourselves, with courage, truth, and infinite love." 2. Years later, Emily was on the veranda of their house watching Nathan teach a group of village children how to fish in the calm morning sea. She had one hand resting on her slightly rounded belly where their first child was growing, a child who would be raised with love, honesty, and the absolute certainty that they belonged in the world. The municipal school had expanded thanks to the dedicated work of both, now offering technical courses and sustainability programs that attracted young people from all over the region. Nathan had become a respected figure in the community, known for his generosity and for his patient way of teaching anything that someone wanted to learn. And Emily had become exactly what she had always dreamed of being, a beloved teacher, a respected writer. Her children's stories were beginning to be published by small publishing houses in Boston, a woman who knew her own worth and wasn't afraid to occupy the space she deserved in the world. Sometimes, on quiet nights, she thought about her mother and her aunt. She thought about how proud they would have been to see that their sacrifices hadn't been in vain, that the truth had finally triumphed, that justice had been done, and that true love had overcome all obstacles. Victoria had died in prison 6 months ago, alone and bitter, with no one to mourn her passing. Dr. Parker had been arrested for corruption and criminal conspiracy. The Blackwood mansion had been sold and the money donated to foundations that combated domestic violence. The dark past had finally been buried, leaving only the lessons learned and the strength gained. "What are you thinking about?" Tars asked Nathan, climbing onto the veranda after his improvised fishing lesson, still dripping seawater. "About how we got here," said Emily, snuggling into his arms, "about all the choices we made, all the obstacles we overcame." and about how it was worth every moment, every tear, every fear, every battle, because it brought us to this exact moment, in this exact place, being exactly who we are. Nathan kissed the top of her head, his hands protectively accommodating over the belly where their child was growing. You know what surprises me the most? What? How our story began with you hiding in the shadows and me running away from responsibilities, and it ended with both of us discovering that true courage isn't the absence of fear, but the choice to do what is right, even when you're afraid. Emily turned in his arms to face him, seeing in the green eyes she had learned to love all the journey. They had travelled together, from the arrogant and frightened young man who had fled to London to the man of integrity and courage he now was. From the invisible shadow she had been to the strong and independent woman she had become. And if someone asked us what the secret is to finding true love, she asked. Nathan smiled, that smile that now completely reached his eyes, that transformed his face into pure light. I would say that the secret isn't finding someone who completes you. It's becoming a complete person, and then finding someone who chooses to build something new with you, something that's bigger than the two of you alone. And if they asked us about the happy ending, I would say that there is no ending, just a continuous restart, each day choosing again to love, again to trust, again to build. Nathan touched her face with the infinite gentleness he had learned during his transformation, each day choosing to be the best version of ourselves for the person we love. Emily leaned in to kiss him, a sweet kiss full of promises, while the afternoon sun gilded the beach where they had found their freedom. In the distance, the waves continued their eternal dance, carrying ancient secrets to the bottom of the sea and bringing back infinite possibilities. And in the simple house on the beach, two people who had been born in opposite worlds but found each other in the only place that truly mattered, in the sacred space of true love and brave choice, continued writing their story. A story that had begun with shadows and secrets, but that now shone with the golden light of truth, honesty, and the infinite promise that love, when it's real, always finds a way. Emily Sanders Wilson had spent 28 years living as a shadow. Emily West Blackwood would live the rest of her life as a flame that no one could extinguish, and alongside Nathan, who had learned that true power comes not from what one inherits but from what one builds, she would create a legacy much more valuable than any fortune, a family based on true love, absolute integrity, and the courage to always choose light, even when darkness seems easier. Because that is the only real magic that exists in the world, the infinite capacity of the human heart to transform, to forgive, to start over, and to love with an intensity that makes everything possible. And they live not just happily ever after, but consciously ever after, aware that happiness is a daily choice, a constant construction, a promise renewed with each dawn that it's worth fighting for love, worth defending the truth, and worth believing that courageous people can change not only their own lives, but the world around them. In the fishing village of Rockport, where the waves whispered ancient stories and the wind carried new promises, Emily and Nathan continued writing the most beautiful chapters of a story.